Having data is one thing, using this data to make informed decisions is another. So how does data shape conservation decisions? Today we look at how countries use spatial data to support national biodiversity strategic and action plans, as well as reporting to the UN Convention on Biological Diversity. We also look at why harmonized data systems and regional collaborations matter.
My name is Jacqueline Karimi, a policy engagement specialist from RCMRD. So basically my work lies in the linkage now of this data and the policies. So rather than just collecting data and having it stored somewhere, we want to make sure that our member states, our stakeholders are using this data to come up with effective actions to now ensure our biodiversity, our ecosystems are well conserved.
So how does biodiversity data collected translate into national conservation policies?
From biodiversity data, or data in general, we move to priorities, then we move to a policy, then we move to an action. So once data is collected, one is able, and then it's analyzed, one is able now to identify their priorities. Now in this case, countries are able to identify which are these areas that require more conservation efforts, which are these areas are the habitats degrading, which are these species that require more intervention. So from now, you identify the priority, then now we go to a policy. So now the policy is being informed by the priorities of that particular country or region. So from this policy now, they are able now to come up with efficient or effective actions to now ensure there is good ecosystems and our biodiversity is well conserved.
Okay, so this data that you're talking about, some of it is derived from geospatial information, right? So what role does geospatial information play in supporting countries to report under the CBD?
So when we talk about geospatial data, think about maps. Basically what a map does in layman terms, visualization. So when these maps are developed, the countries can now be able to visualize, or not even the countries, the non-technical people, the policymakers, they are able to visually see which are these exact areas. So geospatial information answers the question of where. So they are able now to identify which are these ecosystems, and of course now with that information they are able to understand the protected areas, what is the extent of these protected areas, which ones have been encroached, where can we now put more emphasis in terms of dealing with encroachment, or basically more conservation efforts. So underline the term where. So it is very essential. Yeah.
Okay. So basically the maps helps you define that area, the where.
Yes.
Okay, and to show you exactly what has been done, and to sort of give an idea of what needs to be done to be able to sort of either conserve that area or protect that area.
Yeah, so basically the where, the what is degrading, where is it, and you're now able to understand how can we now deal with this issue.
Okay. So from there now you're able to make informed decisions and also report that data that you have. Okay, so how can countries align their national data systems with the Kunming Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework?
So the KMGBF, as you mentioned, basically mandates the countries that are parties to the CBD to report against 23 key targets. So we usually say, there's a way they've been grouped. So from target 1 to target 8, they basically deal with reducing biodiversity loss. So there's a spatial component there. Then we have target 9 to 13 that basically deals with benefit sharing. So we are conserving the environment, but we also need to make sure that the benefits that comes from conserving these ecosystems are being equally shared by everyone. And then now we have target 14 to 23 that basically is about the tools now of mainstreaming. Yeah. So in terms of how now the countries can align their own data systems now to the KMGBF targets. So I'll give an example of Kenya. Kenya is a devolved government, so we have the counties and we have the national government. Under the counties, we have of course, the ministry dealing with climate change and environment, and as well as the national level. So you see, the mainstreaming has to begin within the country itself. Again, other than the devolved part, we have several agencies that deal with biodiversity data. Everyone is collecting a particular data or data sets that needs to be reported. So the countries need to make sure they are using the same methodologies, such that now when this data is collected, one can easily report to the CBD and easily align it now as a country. So the different institutions, the agencies, the different levels of government, they need to align their methodologies. They have to make sure this data is ideally centrally placed for easy access, because I believe many countries, we don't have an issue of an availability of data. Data is there, but now where it's stored, the methodologies, how it can be accessed, and all that is key.
Okay, so as a policy engagement specialist, what are some of the biggest challenges when it comes to making informed decisions, especially in relation to conservation in countries, more so in the region that we are in, Eastern and Southern Africa?
Mm-hmm. I can say it's basically that connection. We have, like I said previously, there's so many institutions that are collecting this biodiversity data, but now there needs to be a central data sharing framework for the country itself, then for them to be able now to uniformly now report this data. So if this data is, how do I say, is it disintegrated? Yes. So you see, the efforts are not going to be, they're not going to be speaking as one voice. So again, now what does that mean? That translates to the confusion in the policies. So the policies are not like well informed, and that's where the issue is. So common methodologies, common a uniform or a central place for collecting this data.
Okay, so when you talk about a centralized data depository, so to speak, this is mainly for the countries, the ministries, the state agencies, and all institutions that are involved with data collection. But what about country to country? Because then there are areas where, you know, we have transboundary ecosystems, we have, you know, in the southern part they call it transfrontiers, yes, transfrontiers. So how then do we ensure that we have a data platform that sort of covers transboundary conservation efforts?
So ideally now, that's an institution like RCMRD comes in. We've seen from under the RCOE project, we have the data geoportal, and from there you can see how the countries are reporting the various data sets for protected and conserved areas. So if all countries are able to do that, and this data is accessible to all countries, then them coming together. So RCMRD now, when we come up with workshops or data engagements, dialogues, you're able to bring different countries. So for example, Tanzania and Kenya, if they're in one table and then they're able to visualize this data, Tanzania can see what Kenya is doing. Is this harmful to us? Is it in line with what we are also doing? So you see, when that data is clearly visible to everyone, it's easier now for the countries to align each other's efforts. And ideally, regional cooperation is something that cannot be underplayed, because we are all in the same race. We want a beautiful ecosystem. We want a beautiful climate for all of us to coexist. There is no way climate in Kenya will be conducive and then we leave out Tanzania. We all have to, yes.
Okay, so you've mentioned regional collaboration. So talk about how regional collaboration can assist in, I know it's sort of almost similar, but data standardization. Because we've talked about data collection, them coming together, seeing what this country has, what the other country has. But what about the issue of data standardization and comparability amongst these countries? Do we have a mechanism that sort of say this is the standard of data that we would want as our region to have? So each country is also is able to sort of share their data as per the standards that it's set within the region.
I think now that's a conversation that comes after. If all countries are now able to have their own data sharing and governing frameworks. So I think first of all we have to do the basic steps first. The countries need to have their own standardized systems, and then because ideally the countries individually report this data to the CBD. So that's a conversation that can come later in terms of standardizing for a whole region, but we know we need to start from the ground. Kenya has to have its own, Tanzania the same, South Africa the same, and we don't have to ideally have the same thing. Kenya can have its own thing and another country can emulate, because what works here might not work elsewhere. Yeah.
And also the fact that countries have different conservation, different ecosystems, different conservation priorities.
So my parting shot is, we should not just be aiming to collect this data and store it somewhere or just for the purpose of reporting. The main goal should be to use this data now to come up with actions and even policies that are effective and that ensure that our ecosystems are well conserved. And in the long run, the benefit is that the livelihoods of everyone will improve, not only for this generation, but the future generations.
Okay, thank you, Jacqueline. So when data is accessible, standardized, and trusted, it becomes power. Power to protect, power to plan, and prioritize.